Chapter 6. Table for 3. Let's talk about tourist season. Tonac stood in front of the silver table, and Melody and Chuck sat on stools at the other end. Melody glanced at Chuck, who tossed her a look that told her this staff meeting was more for her benefit than his. The past couple of weeks, since Melody had arrived, had been pretty steady, but the restaurant was never, ever full. Handfuls of locals came in at odd times, and Melody soon forgot that breakfast, lunch and dinner ever really existed at different times of the day, because Tonac could just as easily serve a breakfast dish at 9 p.m., just as he would serve steak and vegetables at 7 in the morning. Everything seemed to flow around shifts. Locals worked on the island. Everyone will get edgy as tourists show up, and we'll need to be prepared for people at any hour. Some of those tourists might float this way, but unless you hear from me, you show them to an outside table, serve them a beverage, and give them this. He passed Melody a tiny menu that offered sandwiches and cakes. A menu? Melody looked it over, flipping it, wondering if this was where Tonac finally settled on something normal. These sandwiches will be prepared and waiting. You should be able to pick them out and get it to them right away. The goal is to get them to move on quickly. Everyone else will be as we've been doing. You won't cook fancy things for the tourists. Won't they notice that they are only offered sandwiches and cakes when someone next to them might get soufflé or stew? Melody asked. They won't notice. What's in the cakes? He ignored her question, as usual. It was a pattern they'd developed over the past couple of weeks. At every meal she served, Melody asked Tonac about that secret ingredient she was sure he was planting in every dish. If he answered her, it was only to tell her the ingredients. Nutmeg, for a baked biscuit. Strawberries, for a tart. Most of the time he ignored the question. He often fired back his own questions to her, questions she thought were too personal, like where she was born, or what was her favorite food her mother had made for her when she was a child. She often ignored those questions just as he ignored hers. Mostly, she was embarrassed and feeling guilty that she still hadn't written to her mother, who was probably telling all her friends she was sick to death with worry. You can be normal here and give them a slip of paper with the price so they'll drop some cash and leave, he said. Why are we treating them differently? Melody asked. Is this how you make money? Selling sandwiches to rich people who happen to wander over here? Are you worried they'll talk about this place? Chuck groaned. Look, kid. He'd taken to calling her kid, even after the times she'd told him not to. Just do it. There's a reason Tonac does what he does, and some of those tourists aren't exactly our clientele. What do you mean? What would you think of a place that gives away free food that does, well, you know? Chuck spun a finger next to his head. They'd call us crazy and would run us out of here. Melody raised an eyebrow. And Juniper Island locals don't because... Because? Uh-huh. Melody shoved a finger across her eyebrow. She loved Tonac's food, even if she still hadn't experienced quite the same thing she had when she'd first arrived. He also hadn't touched her since the last time when she'd had that vision of the creepy guy. In a way, she was hurt that she served food to many people, and she could see the enrapture happening before her eyes. And yet every dish Tonac gave her only tasted really good, and at most gave her a boost of energy. Nothing else. She was too proud to ask him, and she was starting to wonder if it really was a drug, and she was looking for the high. So, no special food to tourists, because they may think we're crazy and will try to burn us at the stake. That's the good scenario, but yes, Tonac said. But to avoid all of that, sandwiches and cakes on the beach. It's plain enough they won't bother to talk about it, and the prices are cheap enough they'll be embarrassed to tell people they ate here, and I don't expect many of them to show up anyway. How would you know? They usually have meals planned out with the other restaurants. They didn't come here to hide at an empty restaurant at an area of beach that isn't popular. They came to be seen by the other tourists, so the majority of people should just be locals. 1 or 2 tourists will be okay. I'll let you know which is which before you leave the kitchen." They both looked at Melody, as if waiting for her to ask the questions they knew she was thinking. She didn't give them the satisfaction, and simply sat with her arms folded and a look of, "You're both completely insane" on her face. She knew Tonac had some security system installed somewhere she hadn't been able to spot yet, or a phone line where people called ahead and told them they were coming, so he was able to prepare the dishes in advance. At least this is what she assumed, because as she tidied up the kitchen between guests, Tonac was constantly basting, mixing, baking, and tasting dishes well before any customer ever showed up. He'd make a big pot, serve a single portion to a guest, and then toss the rest into a storage bin. He never served leftovers, because by the next morning the food that had been stored was gone, and the plastic bins were magically returned into the cabinets, clean and ready to go. She had yet to figure out where the food went. "So," Tonac tested the silence, keeping his eyes on Melody, "I'm going to need tables set up outside, and that means a new wide porch in front on the beach. There's going to be some construction tonight and tomorrow." Melody groaned. "He hired a crew of people to work overnight. The noise! Why didn't he plan this ahead of time?" He drew up an eyebrow at Melody, as if trying to gauge her reaction to his next request. "I want you to go stay at the hotel." "Huh?" "You're to sleep at the hotel for 2 nights and not come back here until I come to get you. I don't want you near North Shore. Consider it a nice vacation before the craziness starts. You're to tell the locals downtown that we're closed for remodeling." He tapped a finger on the silver table. "How am I supposed to reach everyone?" "You just tell a few people and word will get around. It's a small island." "But why can't I sleep here?" She didn't like the sound of it. Tonac hadn't said a word about the clothes she had bought, nor asked about the money. She still had the change in the toe of the old sneakers she wasn't wearing anymore. Was she supposed to use that for the hotel? "I already reserved the room. If you don't, I'll lose my deposit." Now here he was, paying for an expensive hotel room for a couple of nights. "But," she stumbled for words, "why is Chuck allowed to stay?" For some reason it felt to her as if she were being kept out of a secret, and from the glances exchanged between Chuck and Tonac, she knew she was right. "What else are you changing?" "It's not that we're changing much. It's who is coming over," Chuck said. "He doesn't like it when people watch him work." "Why? Who'd you hire? An illegal immigrant?" They both laughed. Tonac replied, "No, I think he's got his paperwork under control. He just doesn't like people." "But he'll work with you two around?" "He doesn't like women." Chuck's tone rose. "Okay, happy I said it? He hates women. He won't work here if a girl's around, so you have to go." "Is he gay or something?" She didn't mean to pry into personal issues, but the insanity of it all drove the questions from her mouth. Chuck raised his hands in the air. "She's killing me, Tonac. The questions. Fire her. Save my sanity." Tonac chuckled and shook his head. "He's not gay. Vul has had some very bad relationships in the past. He'll do work for me, but he'll only do it if there's no women around. So rather than explain all this to the locals, just tell them that it's under construction and will reopen in a couple days. Why can't you just hire a normal contractor? Because Vul is the best. He's been around forever." His smile lit up his eyes, making the question on the tip of her tongue melt away. Melody gave up. "Fine." "Good girl," Tonac said. "I've made some sandwiches for lunch." Sandwiches made by Tonac were not just sandwiches. The bread was handmade, the delicate steak inside tender and savory. The vegetables were fresh, the condiments were homemade, spooned out from jars. Melody hadn't eaten so well ever in her life, and it made her wonder how long her new pants would actually fit. They were all finishing up their plates, all being Chuck and Melody, as Tonac was packaging the leftovers of the last customer into a dish, when the building shook as a large truck rumbled down the street. Honking nearly rattled the windows. Chuck cursed. "He's here early."
"Vol?" Melody asked.
Tonac motioned to her. "Get upstairs, pack a couple of things, and use the back door. I'll keep him in front."
"This is ridiculous. I'm running from a person as if he'd try to murder me. He might not work around her, but did she really need to sneak around? Wasn't he a reasonable person and could let her walk out the front door? How did he manage to function in the real world with women all over the place? She was almost finished putting a few last things in her bag when she heard stomping outside her room. The door crashed open. Melody had never kept the room locked, as Tonac and Chuck never came down to see her. In the doorway stood Vol. Melody knew it was him, not because she recognized the tall, dark-haired man who looked like he had earned his muscles through hard work and not at the gym. His eyes were pools of darkness, and his face was broad, his nose wide, his beard neatly trimmed. His looks could have earned him a photo shoot for GQ. It was the intense stare of sheer hate that vibrated right through Melody's soul that made her understand who this person was. And he was looking at her like he was trying to make a decision of how exactly he planned to execute her. "I'm leaving," Melody said. Vol blinked and continued to stand in the doorway. There was a ring on his finger, and it gleamed under the light, distracting her. "He's married." Or was. "I know you don't like women," she continued. "I've been told to leave. I'm going." Vol looked around. "This is your room?" His voice was as heavy as he looked. "Yeah," she said in a tone to suggest it was obvious. "It's disgusting." Melody drew back. She didn't like the design of the room either, but she had grown fond of the view and felt a little insulted as she had started to feel like it was her own. "I like the balcony." "You don't deserve it." It was as if he had punched her. Her eyes started to tear, maybe mostly from panic, but he said something that in her heart she had felt since she'd arrived and couldn't deny. It was the core reason why she hadn't written to her mother. There was nothing she had done in her life that warranted deserving a luxury room and cozy job on the beach. Her mother would have said so. Maybe Melody didn't deserve it, but she really liked it. For the fleeting moments when she was able to forget, she thought she was happy. She teased herself about the idea of Juniper being her permanent home one day. She opened her mouth to say something defensive, and then she closed her lips. She couldn't deny the truth. She didn't deserve Juniper Island. "Melody!" Tonac's voice drifted around Vol. Vol moved out of the doorway, but still remained off to the side, his intense eyes on Melody as if peeling off every last bit of flesh to reveal the trembling and insecure soul beneath the surface. "I'm going," she mumbled, though she couldn't move. Her legs felt like lead. Before she knew what was happening, she felt Tonac's arms around her as he lifted her. She wrapped her arms around his neck, buried her head into his shoulder, and let him carry her downstairs and outside. In the street he set her down gently, but held onto her waist, his voice soft in her ears. "Breathe in the air, Melody." She sucked in fresh air and felt the anxiety lifting. Tears cooled on her face. It surprised her that she'd been crying. She swiped at her cheeks. How does he do that? He barely said 3 things to me, and it was as if he... "Don't think about it," Tonac said, cupping her face between his hands. "Look at me." She couldn't help it. He was holding her so close, and she couldn't look elsewhere. "I want you to walk to the hotel right now. Stay there. Tell everyone they have to stay out of North Shore. Tell the sheriff. Say there's construction. He'll tell everyone. I didn't expect him here so soon. And now that he's seen you..." He paused.
He may not do the job?
He shook his head. No, it isn't that. They're going to know about you. He let go of her head, sighing.
Who? Who will know about me? From the side of Mayana there was a crash, and out of the balcony window of Melody's room flew the dresser. It hit the sand with a thud and a crack, splintering apart. My room! She started to march forward toward the house to shout up at Vul when Tonac grabbed her arm. I'll take care of him. You go to the hotel. Stay there. I'll come get you. There was another crash as the sofa chair followed it. Melody took one more look at Tonac. He had to be insane. He wasn't fixing anything. Vul was destroying her bedroom. Please, Melody. Trust me. Tonac's eyes made silent promises to her that everything would be okay. She just had to leave. Chuck stood behind him, her book sack in his hands. He held it out to her silently. She took it and then started the trek to Main Street, refusing to look back as another crash echoed behind her, and she was sure it was the big 4-poster bed.